Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, Martin.
Thank you so much for joining this call. We appreciate it. I'm going to start off by muting everyone, and then I'm going to ask Catherine to unmute her microphone. And then I'm just going to make some introductions. We're going to have a prayer, and we're going to kick off the meeting. Bear with me. Catherine, you on?
I'm on.
Wonderful. Okay. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I want to introduce Catherine Massey, who is the Canon for Transition and Pastoral Ministry at the Diocese of North Carolina. Catherine oversees pretty much all matters pertaining to the call and hiring of clergy in the diocese. So welcome this morning, Catherine. Thank you for coming on the call. And let's start with prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Lovingly, Heavenly Father, we come to you in this Zoom meeting and ask you for your blessing and help as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to see the path in front of us with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel as a parish. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence and reach higher and farther to be the best we can be. We ask this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So I will attempt to moderate this session. Catherine is going to be leading it. At some point, we're going to have a Q&A. And there is a function where you can actually raise your hand. I don't know if everyone knows how to use that, so we'll give that a go. If that doesn't work at Q&A, then you can physically raise your hand, and I will take notes and write down the appropriate people in the best order that I can, and then you will see an opportunity to unmute your microphone when you're invited, and that will be your opportunity to ask a question. So hopefully this goes well. We'll see. But Catherine, again, thank you for hosting this, and let's pass the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. COVID has been full of lots of things, most of them not so great, but it's exciting to try something different in this way that we're having this conversation this morning. So I appreciate and I'm so grateful for an opportunity to be with you all here at Trinity, at least on a screen this morning. A little bit about me. I am indeed the Canon for Transition and Pastoral Ministry here in the Diocese of North Carolina. I live in Wake Forest, so I'm at the other end of the county from you all. I am married to a delightfully crusty Irishman. We have 3 teenage/college-age daughters, most of whom are mostly at home most of the time nowadays. So if you want to pray for somebody, that Irishman's probably a good place to start. We're doing okay. Like everyone else, we're grateful for all that we have and are holding up pretty well. I've been with the diocese for about 10 years, and the work that I do is pretty much what Martin said. I walk alongside clergy and congregations as they do some discernment around where God might be calling them next. I do this work on behalf of our bishop, Bishop Rodman. I also walk alongside the discernment process for the priesthood on behalf of the bishop, our disciplinary process, the Safe Church training program, and pretty much anything else that the bishop asked me to do. It's a pleasure to do this work. And this is one of my most favorite meetings that I wish we were having face-to-face on this beautiful Sunday, chilly Sunday in January. And as I understand it, after talking with Martin and with your vestry, what we're doing today is my hope is we're going to talk a little bit about the search process that your vestry selected. And your vestry needs your help. And I'm going to talk about what they need your help with. We're going to kind of walk through the questions, and you should be receiving a link to how you can fill out that information and get it back to your vestry, because this process won't be any good without your help. So hopefully that's what we're going to do a little bit of this morning, where there'll be some space for some questions that I'll answer to the best of my ability. Martin and the vestry may be able to answer some more of them. And so my hope is it'll be a bit interactive. and we'll go at a pretty good clip so I don't take too much of your time this morning. Your vestry has determined that they wanted to seek what we call a rector time certain process. So you have the wonderful Susan Keaty, who I saw on the screen a little while ago. Morning, Susan, my friend. It's so good to see you. And what that means is you are going to be seeking a 3/4 time priest, right, Martin? So 3/4 time priest, hopefully this year in 2021. And what that will be a 2-year call. So I think we talked about it being a 2-year call. And so what that means is we're going to post a position, but we need some data, which is where we're going to need your help. So hang on. But we're going to post a position for a national search for a 3/4 time position priest. And the hope is, as the year and the first year goes by and into the second year, the hope is that you all will be making this a full-time position. That's the goal. Trinity has been one of those places that has just been a joy. I meet with Susan at our interims meetings every month, and in the middle of a pandemic, Susan said, we had 9 new members. So what a wonderful place and what a wonderful growth and opportunity that is going on down there. So I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for someone to come and be with you all. Some process pieces around how this will happen is that, again, it'll be a national search. The position will be posted on our diocesan website. Certainly through your website, your social media pages, we'll be sure to give you a link to post that position. Places we want everyone to know about it. We'll be posting it through the national church's publications and through some transition sites that clergy often look at around the Episcopal Church. So we hope to post a position that the vestry will create probably in early to mid-February, just sort of depending on when they get it done. We'll post it for about 4 to 6 weeks. During that time, I'll be the candidates that apply for the position, I'll be meeting with and doing some interviewing on behalf of the bishop with, and then present my notes to the bishop, who will then discern the candidate to present to your vestry, who then will invite this person. Hopefully we'll be able to invite people back to town to meet with your vestry. I'm thinking probably in the late spring. That should be a pretty reasonable timeline for candidate to come and meet with this vestry to determine if this might be a good call for them and for Trinity. And so the hope will be is if we could have someone here probably after Pentecost. Notice I didn't give you any set timelines on that. I think that's just in light of COVID. I think that's just a reasonable expectation, is we'd love to have someone after Easter and into the early summer. So that's our hope. We'll see how that goes, but that's a pretty reasonable timeline, we think, for that to happen. And again, this is a 2-year call, which means for the first 2 years, this person will be your rector in all matters. So at about the start of the second year, there'll be some discernment conversations between your priest and the vestry about how's it going. Is this something that we'd like to make a more permanent call? And so the hope is that both the vestry and the priest will consider that to be a thumbs up conversation. And if that's the case, the vestry will ask the bishop for permission to call this priest as the rector permanent. That could be at 3/4 time. You may already go to full time. We'll just sort of see. And if for any reason that either the vestry discerns that maybe not, or the priest discerns not, then that 1 year will be a time of transition, and they will operate as your interim rector as we seek a permanent rector for this position. We'll come back to the vestry and have that conversation at that time. So we talked about, Bishop Ryder and I talked about this with the vestry, and that's how they decided to proceed. And it seems like a very reasonable process to us. As I said, what the vestry needs your help with is to get some data, because they need to post a job description. And one of the pieces in posting a job description is to fill out a document from the Office of Transition Ministry. Now, the Diocese of North Carolina has an Office of Transition Ministry, which is mostly me, but the National Church has one as well up in New York City. And so it is kind of like, it is at the office where Bishop Curry has his offices when things are normal times. And I like to call it is kind of like LinkedIn or eHarmony for the Episcopal Church. And so there is a document for the Office of Transition Ministry portfolio that we're going to ask your vestry to fill out. And on it has some really basic information, such as your address, your website, how many parishioners you have, what kind of formation programs do you have, all of those kind of really basic pieces of information. But also there's a document, there's some information in the back that are some questions that we'd like to have asked about you, that are kind of appreciative inquiry based, which means they're not really short answers. Or they are short answers. They're not just one-line answers. So what we need some help with is getting you all to give them some data to work with. Your website is also a really important factor for clergy who will be discerning a call. And by the way, it is fabulous. I just want to tell you, I look at lots of websites, particularly for congregations in transition. Bravo, bravo, bravo. I don't know who manages it, but you all deserve thumbs up. It is really, really great. It shows a lot about who you are. It is current. It is really effective, especially during the time of COVID. So kudos to you. That piece of information will go into this job posting. So I think that one of the key things that you need to know is that you all are really in a pretty good place. We're going to post this job once the vestry creates this portfolio for about 2 or 3 weeks. I think we're going to send a questionnaire out for you to answer the questions here after today, but we're going to post the job, as I said, sorry, for about probably about 4 weeks. So let me pull up our survey. Any questions so far before I talk about the survey? It might be a good time to talk about some transition-based questions. I'll trust you, Martin, to get me the right question. If there are any.
I don't see anyone waving at the moment.
Perfect. Wonderful. That is, you are very kind. Let's talk a little bit about the survey. You're going to receive a link from Martin and from the church. It'll probably be posted. I think Martin and I talked about, he's going to post it on your website. He's going to send you an email link to it. There'll be lots of ways to have access to it in the coming days and weeks. And we want all the input that we can so that they can answer the questions. The good news is that the input that you give your vestry, all the information is going to be shared back with everyone. So the results of the survey are going to be shared with the entire congregation so everyone's voices can be heard. We won't know if Mary or Sue or Jill or Bob or whoever answers them, but everybody's responses are going to be provided back to the congregation so everyone can know that their voice can be heard. So if you know of folks that are not on the internet and need a printed copy, please let your vestry know. They'll make sure to print out a copy of this survey and mail it to them so they can have it. We want to make sure that everyone has access to this so their voice can be heard. So I know that the vestry will make sure that that happens. We're going to be using SurveyMonkey, and I didn't share my screen with this. We're just going to kind of talk. I'm going to tell you about the questions and give you some advice about how to answer them. I'm not going to tell you how to answer them because I don't know what the right answers are for your congregation. But it's only 7 questions, so this is not going to take you forever, but I hope you'll spend a little bit of time thinking about your answers because your data is so very important in the life of Trinity. The first question that we ask is, remember a moment that was a high point when you felt Trinity, our church, was doing God's work and fulfilling its mission. So what I'd love for you to do is just take a little bit of time, think about that. And instead of just giving a 1-sentence answer and said, we provided meals for the homeless, for example, think about a time and give some narrative thought to this and write out an answer for your vestry. It's really, really helpful to be more wordy than not. There won't be any limitation to your writing. And again, once it comes in, it's anonymous. So just please make sure that you fill out that answer. The second question that we ask, and by the way, I'd be asking these questions if we were together on a Sunday. So I'm trying to be patient with the fact that I'd far prefer to be together having some snacks with you all down in the basement and chatting with you face to face and running around and wishing I had tennis shoes on instead of heels. But today I'm in my fuzzy slippers, so I'll take that. The second question that we like to ask if we were together is, it's called the lightning round. And what I'd love for you to do when you answer this question is to name the 3 things you value most about Trinity. Just kind of bullet points, whatever they are, put them down. I mean, it's really, really important. And I'll tell you that in the years I've been asking these questions in all of our congregations, and years ago when I was working with my colleague, Michael Hunn, who has now gone on to be the Bishop of New Mexico, but before he did that, he left me and went to go work with Bishop Curry in New York. The first time I did this meeting with him in a congregation that was in transition, we were in the back of the room while you all were answering the questions, and then we were going to share them. And I said, so you ask the same questions all the time, I guess uh, that means that you hear the same thing in every congregation. And he said, no, no, grasshopper. The reality is that each congregation has their own identity, and the values are what defines a different congregation each time. So again, letting your vestry know what you value at Trinity is going to be very, very important. So think about those, put down some bullet points. If you do more than 3, I don't think they'll be angry with you. They just want to know what your answers are to those questions. The third question that we ask is think about the period of your entire life, not necessarily just there at Trinity, and recall a time when you most appreciated the ministry of a priest. What was happening? If I call the first question I just said, the lightning round, this question is a Kleenex question. This often elicits some emotional responses in people. What I'm asking for is what was happening? What did you appreciate about the ministry of a priest? And so this is a place where you can certainly tell your story if you feel comfortable. You don't have to. You can kind of summarize what you appreciated about the ministry of a priest. Um, your vestry needs to hear what it is about a priest and the qualities we're looking for in our pastor and our priest. And to be reminded, of course, that we're not seeking the CEO of a religious nonprofit, but we are seeking your next pastor, priest, and spiritual leader. And so the things that we think about for a priest or the qualities are very, very important. So take a little bit of time and think about your question. The fourth question that we ask is, I'm wondering if you could look a little bit to the future. Gosh, I'm thinking about the future all the time now because it's 2021 and everything is going to be better right away. So far, that has not proven to be true, but I'm certain it's coming. But we would be asking this question regardless. I'm wondering if you could think about, we can't look into the future very far. I'm thinking about 3 years. In 3 years, we can be thinking about our dear friend Susan, who I don't know what, Susan, you'll be doing. You're one of the coolest people that I know. You'll surprise us all. So we all can't wait to see what you're doing in 3 years, Susan. But what I'd love you to think about at Trinity is, in the next 3 years, what are the 3 most exciting, energizing, and spirit-filled things that you might be doing with your new rector? So this is a time to dream. If there are things that you are hoping to have happen in the next 3 years at Trinity, this is a great time to dream. Sometimes the answer that I hear is, we got the roof fixed, we balanced the budget, and we paved the parking lot. These are all dreams, perhaps. Certainly put those things down. But if there are things that you all are hoping and dreaming for, please share that with your vestry, because that's going to help them think about the qualities and characteristics that they're looking for in the next rector. So this is the time for you to share those dreams. The fifth question is about sermons. One of the things that your vestry is going to be reviewing is, and I'm going to be reviewing as well, are sermons. So clergy, they record them now on videos. They used to just send us written text, but there's lots of ways that you can view a good sermon. And I like to say that many people would say that Michael Curry is the best preacher in the Episcopal Church, but you probably wouldn't want to hear him every Sunday. So what your vestry needs to know is, what to you makes a good sermon. So if you could take a few minutes when you get the survey to think about that and write it down. And I've heard my favorite answer when we do this thing in a group. I've done this particular conversation we're having. I've done it with 10 people. I've done it with 400 people. And so sometimes towards the end, if we've had church, we've been together, someone says, my idea of a good sermon is about 10 minutes. And that might be your answer. So please put that down. But if you could take a few moments to share with your vestry what a meaningful sermon is to you and what that means, what would you tell your friend about that sermon? Please write those characteristics down. COVID has kind of shifted, of course, a lot of things. And I'm pretty sure that most of the candidates and clergy and congregations that are going to be discerning call over the next year to 3 to 4 years, is the question of COVID and what that impact has been is going to be a part of it. And so we decided to ask a question around that. And the question that we have, that you'll see in the survey, is, COVID has brought sadness and surprises, disappointments and learnings. As we seek our new rector, what learnings and hopes will you be hoping to share with your new priest? So think about what you've learned, what you've appreciated there at Trinity, and share some of that with your vestry, because that's going to help them shape the questions that they ask and as they start to plan for the future. And then, because we didn't really know how else to do this, but the most helpful thing that we believe will be helpful for your vestry is there anything else you'd like your vestry to know? If you could please leave your contact information, this will be in the box. And a vestry member will be in touch. So this is a place for you. If there's anything else you want your vestry to know about as they begin this search, or just in general, please put it in this box or put your contact information in there, and they will be in touch. They really want to know what you're thinking. COVID has made so much connection challenging, but this is an important time. So share your thoughts, let them know, let them be in touch so that they can make sure your voice is heard. And that's it for the survey. It's not really in depth. It requires you all to do some thinking and be a little more verbose than just a yes no kind of answer. So I hope that helps describe what that is. Are there any questions about that?
Feel free to raise your hand if you have a
Yeah.
question. Robert, sorry. I've got to go backwards and forwards between two screens. Sorry, Robert. Can you unmute, Robert?
Yes. How will the survey be distributed to us?
So we'll have an email that will go out after this session, and it's a link to SurveyMonkey. What I'll do is I'll look and see if anyone needs actually a hard copy of it, and we'll make sure that we deliver those as well. But if you're able to do it online, that would be the easiest way. So you'll receive an email with a link.
Yeah, and I think, Martin, what I did was, so for example, if you're in a household and more than one person would like or need to fill out that survey, that should be no problem. So you should be able to fill it out multiple times.
Any other questions on that piece from anyone? And are you raising your hand, or are you just adjusting? You're adjusting.
She's baking bread.
I have a question, Catherine, just on the process of rector time certain.
Sure.
Is the parish obligated to accept the candidate that the diocese sent to us?
Sure. That's a great question. So what Bishop Rodman, as I said before, will be the person who will recommend a candidate one at a time to your vestry. And that will be based upon all of the data and the people who apply. And so your vestry will receive one candidate whom they will be asked, I hope, we'll assume that by the spring, particularly the mid to late spring, there'll be some ability to open up churches and have a candidate meet with your vestry in space and in kind, so they can tour the church in the area. And meet face to face. It's my dream to meet people face to face again in a real way, other than just in a parking lot. But what will happen is that there'll be some discernment conversations, some social time with your vestry. Your candidate will preach and preside in whatever fashion presiding is safe to happen for your vestry and your vestry alone. And after that, that's a discernment time for both the priest and for your vestry, after which time your vestry will vote on if they would like to call this person to be the rector for the next 2 years. Should the vestry determine that that's not the case, that's fine. We'll probably meet and say, what did we miss? Tell me what we're missing about that, and we will continue to look. So you don't have to say yes to the first candidate. It may be the best candidate, who knows? But you don't have to say yes, Martin. So that's a great question.
As a follow-up to that as well, if I may,
Sure.
are there any disadvantages to that approach versus a full-time, full-blown search?
I think it's a great question. No, I often a congregation uses this kind of process. We have a couple of processes that we of course shared with your vestry. It's a time, it allows for some streamlining. It assumes good relationship between a diocese and a congregation. It allows for fewer people to have to not necessarily give input, but to go through the process. So there's a lot of benefit to it, particularly we often use it in a time of a congregation that has either been in crisis or is ready to get on with it. So sometimes, for example, if a congregation has had a priest die in place, if a congregation has gone through a big level of misconduct and they need immediate pastoral care, that's one reason we use it. A lot of times we use it for a congregation that has good relationship with the diocese. They know that their input's going to be heard, and they have a good relationship, particularly with the bishop, who of course is the one who makes these decisions in relationship with your vestry. And so there's some trust there to know that the bishop is not going to just send along any old buddy, but at least someone that would be potentially a good fit and allow for mutual discernment to happen in a more rapid pace than it might if we waited for a search process.
Thank you. I think we have two questions, one from Barbara Lawrence and one from Donna Wooten. So I'll go to Barbara first and ask you to unmute.
Am I unmuted? Yes.
Mhm.
I come from an academic kind of background, and have been involved with credentialing and so forth. What I'm asking is, what credentials do you require for an applicant to present before you would even screen them for us? Number two, does the vestry have access to some of those credentials? Curriculum vitae, what are the credentials? And the third question is, if any candidate is selected initially, would we have the opportunity to hear them preach a sermon?
Great questions, Barbara. And so let's see, I'll try to go in order, but maybe not. We'll see how I do. When a candidate applies for a position in this diocese and also pretty much across the Episcopal Church, generally they send a person such as myself, a transition officer, candidate ordinary, a number of things. They send a cover letter directed to either the vestry or search committee. So it's a personalized cover letter. They send a resume or CV of their choosing, whatever that looks like to them. We're not too particular about that. So again, it shows the things that you would expect. And they send, a clergy person also sends their version of an office transition ministry portfolio, this document that your vestry is going to be creating. And within that, it has for them, it has things like where they've gone to school, what their educational history is, the places that they've served. Again, you'll see it on the resume, but it's in this document as well. In there, you will also see things like a place to tuck in a blog link where you might be able to hear sermons, where your vestry will be able to listen to sermons that they've done before. If they've had writings or book links or any of those sorts of things, or press releases or things, there'll be places where they can show some things about themselves. Additionally, your candidates or clergy folk also answer those same questions that your vestry will be answering. There's some questions in there about, think about a time when you experience conflict. When did it go well? When didn't it go well? And what did you learn, for example? Tell us about your relationship to stewardship. How do you take care of yourself? What is your thought about the church of the future? So there's some kind of, again, there's these appreciative inquiry based type questions. And so those are the questions that clergy folk answer, but also your vestry will be answering about Trinity. So everyone answers those questions. So they provide a packet essentially of information to us, Barbara. And so we take those and we hold them. So that's one piece of the verifying process. Once we receive that information and we begin to start to do some discernment, which is some pre-interviewing kind of stuff with the candidate, I'm going to be checking where they've served. So for example, I'll be checking the diocese. If they're a priest in this diocese, we'll determine quickly whether they're a priest in good standing. But if they've been served in other places, I'm going to be calling my counterpart in their diocese and asking some questions about them. So I'm going to be asking, hi, Mother Mary has applied for a position at Trinity Fuquay-Varina. What can you tell me? And so a brief explanation kind of goes in a red light, green light, yellow light kind of process. And so a green light is, if you take Mother Mary, you owe me. And let me tell you why. And they're going to proceed to tell me a bunch of great things about it. I'm going to go, great, those are the people that we want. Occasionally, very, very rarely, I could hear something under the guise of Mary is not allowed to be seeking she is under a pastoral directive from her bishop at this time and is not allowed to be looking for work outside of the diocese, which would be an immediate stop. So we're going to we would stop it at that point. And it would not be because Mary preached a terrible sermon on last Thursday. It would be because of some significant misconduct, and that would be a conversation with the bishop. Sometimes you'll hear some kind of a yellow light, and sometimes that's a pastoral reality. And so my role in a diocese is to make sure that I know our clergy, and not gossip about our clergy, but I'm aware of them. And so if someone called me and asked me about Mother Mary, and I knew that Mary was a woman who about 2 years ago had lost a young child to suicide, that would be something I would let our bishop know, because it's a pastoral reality that would not be a detriment to her ministry, but it's something that our bishop would need to know. So we do that level of that sort of a thing. We'll also be conducting a formal background check on the clergy person. So that includes, we use a company called Active Screening Faith that does a DMV check, a credit check. We do a national, federal background check, and a national sex register offender check. So we do all of that before I give this candidate to Bishop Rodman. So we are going to vet them to some extent. Once your vestry receives a candidate, they will be asked to check references. So the vestry will check references on their own, so they can answer their own questions as they talk to people who these people provide references to. How did I do?
Great.
The only other question I had was, will we be able to hear a
I knew I missed one. Thank you, Barbara. I thought I missed something. So will the congregation be able to? No. So what happens is the vestry you all have elected your vestry, and they are charged with making this decision on your behalf. So pray for them. We're praying for the candidates, but we're also praying for the leadership of Trinity, who has been charged with making this call.
Okay, Barbara.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got 2 more questions, and that comes from Donna Wooten and I think Mike Woods. I'll go to Donna first.
Yes, a couple of things I was interested in got covered by Barbara's question, but I have a question back to the Survey Monkey thing. When that goes out, I'm sure there's a time frame. Will everybody be told a time frame? Because I'd hate for somebody, and I'm notorious for it myself, putting something off and then missing out on getting their voice heard.
Yeah, in the email we'll put some target dates, and you'll see multiple emails. So you're going to be emailed to death until you do return the survey.
Right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, let's find Mike. Mike, I'm not sure if you're still on, or if you need to ask a question anymore. Your hand looks like it's gone down, but Catherine.
I do have the question I had, and I guess Barbara kind of answered it. I understand the process has to be controlled with the vestry's involvement and working with the bishop, but let's right before the vestry makes its final decision, there's no way the congregation could just meet the candidate. I mean, like socially, like that's just a verboten. That's just not done. And I was just wondering, why is that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Mike. So this is a discernment process both for the priest and for the vestry, who represents all of you. And so they are the only ones that actually get to vote your vestry. And of course, the candidate has a vote whether they discern whether they'll take the call or not. So the decision and that conversation needs to reside within that body. I would also say that in some ways, the process that your vestry selected, this rector time certain process, provides you with a bit of, I guess I would call it insurance, if that helps, because it is anxiety to think there's a bit of anxiety behind, wait a minute, how many people are on your vestry, Martin? A dozen?
Oh, we have 9.
9. 9 people are going to choose the next rector of this place all by themselves? Are they sure they know us? That's why this survey is really important. And any information that you want to make sure that they know is important. But the process with Rector Time Certain is this person is committed specifically for 2 years. The hope is they'll be here for a really long time. One of the reasons I think your vestry had some confidence in this was as we've done this process in this diocese. Oh, probably, I think Bishop Rodman and I were in a meeting a few weeks ago, I think 14 times. And so far we're 14 for 14. And that would be probably over the last 10 to 12 years. But 2 years gives you a process where if this is not a good fit, certainly there's going to be a place to step out of it. But my hope is that good discernment will be happened by all. Your vestry will be keeping you up to date about when they're meeting candidates to please hold everyone in prayer. Please hold the candidates in prayer. Give thanks for all people who will be discerning whether this is a good fit for them as well.
Okay.
Did that help at all?
Thank you. I understand.
Yes, sir.
I've got another question. This is from Catherine Rubin.
Hi. So the vestry is going to do the reference checks. I just wondered, does the diocese supply the questions they use, or is that something that the vestry comes up with? And can we find out as part of the congregation what the questions are to that?
So your vestry will figure out the questions that they want to ask. Often the people that your typical clergy person might provide as a reference might be a senior warden in their current church or a most recent church, a clergy colleague, someone that they've worked in across the church, maybe a partner within the parish. So I don't know about you, but when I give references on my resume, I make sure they're really going to say something really great about me. Occasionally, I've been in an interview process where I know someone's going to be going, I'm not so sure. And I know it might surprise you. I'm a pretty nice person, but there's occasionally people that don't like me that I've worked with, and we've done a process. And occasionally I've kept a few of those people around and said, would you be willing to be a reference for me? Your vestry it's their decision whether they want to tell you the reference questions that they asked. My advice to you might be in that last question on your survey is, hey, vestry, tell them, say, when you're checking references, ask about this. And if you want to know more, please call me. So that's what I would suggest. And that way they can get a little sense of the history. Perhaps it's a question of anxiety. Perhaps it's about your own history and relationship with clergy and relationships within a church. So that might be some good advice to give your vestry. Again, this is a place to let your voice be heard. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Grace Kern, I'm going to ask you to unmute. There we go.
Hi, good afternoon. I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Does the existing pastor, in this case, Mother Susan, also fill out a questionnaire? Because obviously she's going to be in a unique position to look at the totality of the pastoral needs of Trinity.
That is a great question. And no. So, but let's remember Susan happens to be one of my most favorite people in the whole universe. Susan knows
Ours
this.
too.
I know. She's pretty awesome. Susan's in a different position. You're so right, Grace. She's sort of the person standing on the sidelines, right? So for her, it will probably be interesting data. She'll be able to see the results of the survey just like the rest of you. She'll be able to go, how interesting. But her voice will not be part of that. Her job is to walk alongside you all to get to the other side.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? If you
I see Bob.
I see Bob. Yeah, thank you. Bob, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
How about that?
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead.
Okay, Catherine, just a clarification. My experience before was that in a larger church, the search committee invited 3 people and interviewed all 3 and then made their recommendation. My understanding and what you've told us here is that the vestry can, and you would agree to candidate A, And then that would be a yes or no. And if it's a no on either side, then candidate B, they'd be separate decisions, not a decision where the group can look at all three against each other. Is that right?
That's right, Bob. That's exactly right. And that's more about, the vestry is being asked to discern one candidate at a time, and they go yes, no. And that it could be the candidate says no too, by the way.
Right.
And then we move on to the next one. So it's not well, we're going to say no for now, but we might come back to this person. So this is a yes, no. And that's why it moves a lot more quickly. So that you're absolutely right. So it's kind of a one and done. And if it's not the right one, that's perfectly okay. We'll want to know, we'll talk to the vestry, Bishop Rodman, and I'll check back in with the vestry and go, tell me what we missed. It may be something very straightforward. It may be a little more subtle. So we want to know, so that as we continue to listen and pray about this and meet with folks and talk, that's one of my, other than meeting with congregations and doing this work, one of the most interesting and great privileges that I get is to meet clergy across the country and sometimes around the world who want to be here in North Carolina. And they want to tell me either how awesome they are, how much they want to be here. And I love to say, let me tell you about the great congregations that we have that are looking for clergy. So my hope is that there'll be some great opportunity around this. But you're right, Bob, it's kind of a one and done situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Any other questions for Catherine while we have her? Barbara, are you looking to ask a question? No? Sorry, Mother Susan, you were going to say something? I see Karen.
Only thing I was going to say is that Edna has her hand up.
Who, sorry?
Edna.
Edna, thank you. I saw Edna before, and I apologize, Edna. And I have Karen Teague as well, I believe. So let's go to Edna first.
My brother-in-law was on a search committee for a new rector in Indiana. And then a select portion of the committee made surreptitious visits to the churches just to observe the interaction without anybody knowing who they were, of how the rector interacted with the parishioners. Is anything of that nature going to occur?
Let's hope so, Edna. Thank you for the question. My hope is that your vestry, when they get this candidate, they'll meet with them, do some on-the-ground discernment as the full body of the vestry. This is my dream. And then if I'm going to continue to dream, particularly again in the late spring, should the vestry want to go see this person serve, this priest serving in their current parish, you're right. A couple of them might want to make a on-the-road trip visit to see them in play at their church. They'd want to let them know they're coming, and be able to listen to them preach in the church, sort of see what their leadership style looks like. A lot of that will just depend on COVID, but that is generally a norm. Yes, ma'am.
Karen, you had a question? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
So we are going to be looking at 3/4 time with the hope of eventual full-time. We all know that Mother Susan has been half-time and put in full-time. How do we, well, pretty close. Don't shake your head no, because we know better. And I think that's just pretty much par for the course for most priests who feel their call. I'm wondering, how do we as a church find direction, or I guess I'm saying, how do you decide what you need your 3/4 time priest to be doing? How do you build that job description, so to speak, so that the things that we might be looking forward to, revealed by the survey, is put out there?
I think it's a great question, Karen. And as the wife of a priest, you've lived it, right? Like, so, clergy often work 24/7, but skilled clergy like Steve and Mother Susan, you all, this is not, and Susan's heard me say this before, this isn't her first rodeo. And so she knows how to lead. But there's a lot of faithful folks, even on the screen, I suspect, that are doing quite a bit of leadership within that congregation to make things happen. It looks like it's all possibly coming from Mother Susan, but it's not. Your vestry has a role in that. I think that one of the key things that particularly will happen as this discernment continues is what do we need the priest to do and what can we take on? And it'll be interesting, I think, particularly as we re-enter the world post-COVID, or as COVID goes on the decline, what that looks like. I think that's going to be an important part of any conversation that a vestry has with a clergy person in this search and in any other search going on across the church. Lots of people have had a lot of time to think about what they value and what they need. And so I think that's going to be a mutual conversation that you're all going to want to pay attention to. So, and 3/4 time has a different line in the stand than 40 hours. I don't know many clergy that work less than 40 hours, and most of us work more than 40 hours in any job that we possess. So keeping good boundaries around that so that your priest can remain healthy and continue to minister to you all will be very, very important. I'm really mindful of how clergy have been able to care for themselves amongst the midst of everything that is going on. It's a question I'm asking clergy all the time. These are challenging times for sure. I hope that helps, Karen.
Yes, thank you.
I have Barbara again. I'm not going to ask you to unmute. You still
okay.
there?
Something that has been, I'm just sitting here and I'm looking at a particular person, and that's Deacon Bob. And I'm looking at him because I would like to know, how is this going to fit with Deacon Bob? What is he, how does this work with Deacon Bob and his role in the church or in this search or so forth?
So Deacon Bob, you're not on the vestry, correct?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not, but I attend the vestry as head of outreach. I do not have a vote. No, I'm not on it at all.
So Bob will not be a part of the vestry discernment process because he is not a voting member of the vestry. So he is in some ways what a lot of folks like myself have been is we're not staff members, but we're staff members. So what happens next is important to folks like Bob. In previous diocesan administrations, your deacon would have been reassigned at the beginning of your transition, which has been ongoing for a long time. And Bishop Rodman has altered that a bit in the season that we've been in, which is that once a new priest is called to Trinity, there will be a time of discernment between the new priest and the deacon and the bishop, who will make a decision about reassignment of your deacon, should that happen. So that will be a mutual discernment between those three people at that time. So Deacon Bob, pray for Deacon Bob. We're grateful for his service, and that's where we sit with that. Does that help, Barbara?
Yes, I just wanted to know if that was, all part of this, or if, he would be staying or not, or, just.
That's sort of TBD, so.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to Grace. Ask you to unmute.
Just one more question. I'm sorry. Is Trinity the only church looking for a pastor here in the diocese?
I wish, Grace. My job would be really boring if it were, though. So no, ma'am. Generally, this is a large diocese. The Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina is one of the 7 largest dioceses in the Episcopal Church of North America. And so at any given time, I probably have 25, we'll call them transition projects at the minimum underway. So that could be an entire congregation, a priest or an associate, a process underway. But in particular for the season that we're entering into right now, we certainly have Trinity Fuquay-Varina, we have St. Paul's in Smithfield, we have St. Philip's in Durham, We have St. Stephen's in Durham. And those are the ones that are coming right off the top of my head, but we have a lot. So, and I think that frankly, the other side of COVID will probably make transition in the church a significant thing. There are going to be congregations that are not going to be able to continue to afford either full-time associates or full-time clergy. And there's going to be a shift, and we'll be having folks that are looking in that way. We're going to have folks that were thinking about retirement or a change before, or COVID made them go, this is the time. There's going to be a significant shift in transition probably for the next 3 to 5 years. But this is a busy diocese. So that's why, I think that it's more important for your voice to be heard than my voice in this transition, because you know, and your vestry knows who the next rector of Trinity Fuquay is, and not me. We need the bishop's approval, but it is your voice that is what is important and then what is to come. So I learned a long time ago that my role is to often empower those who were charged with that, give them some best practices, and let them loose to do the work.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're coming up on almost 10 afternoon. So if there are any more questions, if people think after this session is finished and do have questions, feel free to send them to me, and I will send them on to Catherine and ask if she would be so gracious as to answer those and send a reply back. We'll have the email out very shortly with the survey link, and would appreciate everyone's input on that, obviously. I don't know if you've got a few words that you want to say to wrap up here, Catherine, but I want to thank you very much for certainly your role in this whole process. We couldn't do it without you, and just appreciate you doing this today for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you all for being willing to do it this way. This is not my preferred mode, but it might be before this is over with. COVID has lent to my ability to be flexible, and if you do my work, you better be flexible. So I appreciate your willingness to give this a go. I remain grateful and privileged to get to do this work and walk alongside you, and know that you are all in my prayers as we all listen for who God is calling to be with us next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody, and have a great Sunday. And don't forget our annual meeting next Sunday.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.